The FBI is stepping up efforts to investigate several very high-profile cases from just before and during the Biden era. Deputy Director Dan Bongino says the Bureau is now doubling down on and pushing more resources to solve cases of what he calls, and I'm quoting him now, potential public corruption. CNN senior justice correspondent Evan Perez is here with us in the Situation Room. Evan, one of these cases involves pipe bombs found near the DNC and RNC headquarters on the day before the January 6th insurrection up on Capitol Hill. What more can you tell us?
Right, Wolf. Well, these pipe bombs were found. They were found on the morning of January 6th, and it diverted resources, law enforcement resources, if you recall, that morning over to the RNC and the DNC, which obviously coincided with the beginning of the riot that attack of the mob that attacked the U.S. Capitol, and that's one of the reasons why there's been a lot of conspiracy and a lot of conjecture about exactly who did this. I'll read you just a part of what the Bongino social media post said. He said, "The director and I evaluated a number of cases of potential public corruption that understandably have garnered public interest. We made this decision to either reopen or push additional resources and investigative attention to these cases." And then he mentions the pipe bomb case, obviously, and a couple others. Now, the question here, though, Wolf, is, what new things could the FBI be doing? We know, and you and I have talked about the pipe bomb investigations. We've seen them pour in a lot of resources. They've made over 1,000 interviews to try to find the person who placed these bombs there the night before. And so far, they have not been able to break this case open. Perhaps a new set of eyes could finally find the suspect who placed those bombs there, Wolf.
And Evan, what can you tell us about the other two cases that the FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino wants to reopen?
Right. Well, there's one of them is the Dobbs decision, the leak of the Dobbs decision, essentially what was the draft of what became the decision from the U.S. Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade and the rights of women to have abortions in this country. The second one is the finding of a small bag of containing cocaine in a cubby inside the White House, and both of those were looked at. The Secret Service could not find who placed who had cocaine in the office there in this section, which had a lot of public access, including construction workers and others. They could never find it. And of course, the Dobbs decision, of course, in the end was verified to, the draft was accurate. What's interesting about that, Wolf, is whether the Supreme Court, which is a separate branch, will allow the FBI to come in and say, do interviews with the justices. That would be an extraordinary step.
It would be. All right, Evan Perez, thank you very, very much. There's more news we're following, but first I want to bring in CNN senior law enforcement analyst, former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. Andrew, what do you make of this announcement from the Deputy Director of the FBI to reopen some of these cases?
Yeah, Wolf, it's a little bit concerning, I'll be honest with you. It raises some questions about what the deputy director's understanding of public corruption actually is. As we know, public corruption under federal law is basically when someone who's in a position of trust takes something of value in return for executing an official duty. So it's almost impossible for me to understand how these three scenarios conform with that federal criminal violation, unless he's suggesting that the investigators, which would be the FBI in terms of the pipe bomb case, or maybe the Secret Service in terms of the cocaine in the White House case, had somehow intentionally not done their jobs and reached no conclusion of those cases for some corrupt purpose. I can't even imagine what that would be. It's a pretty serious allegation to make against his own people and people of a neighboring partner agency, but I guess we'll see how it all plays out.
I just want to follow up on that. Are those the kind of cases that the FBI would normally look into and reopen in a situation like this?
Not at all. So in the case of the bombing, that is one that is, I would expect, is still under active investigation. And it's always good with a case that's gone a bit cold to bring in new eyes, to do some sort of a review, maybe to contribute additional resources. But again, there's no obvious public corruption angle there. The other two cases are not even really FBI matters. The cocaine in the White House would have been investigated by the Secret Service. We know that they conducted an investigation. They reviewed, they said hundreds of people had been in that area during that day, and it was impossible to figure out who had actually left the cocaine there. As far as the Supreme Court case goes, that was investigated by officials within the Supreme Court. As Evan pointed out, that is a separate branch of government. That's the judicial, the absolute pinnacle of the judicial branch. They conducted an investigation and ultimately determined that they couldn't identify, after having looked at the computer network, all the things documents that have been accessed and printed out, they couldn't determine who was responsible for that. It's really not an FBI matter at all. The FBI investigates leak cases, but only when those cases implicate national security. That's clearly not the case here. So I'm not sure what the FBI director would be predicating an investigation of that violation of Supreme Court policy on.
I think it's true that these cases have drawn a lot of attention, especially in conservative media. Are you concerned at all, Andrew, that they're now becoming politicized?
Very much so. Very much so. We know that this administration makes a lot of their decisions about what to do day to day based on what they're seeing in the news cycle. And that's really what this feels like. As I said, it's not, there are no obvious political corruption connections here from our perspective, but that seems to be the flag that the deputy director is waving. That's one that's always greeted with some, received very positively in right-wing media. And it's also coming at a time when there's not a lot of good FBI news coming out about leadership decisions. We learned last week they're forcing all agents to spend 30% of their time doing immigration work, which has never been the case in the FBI. They are basically eliminating the white-collar crime program, leaving the nation bereft of professional investigators to hold corporate malfeasance to account. So there's a lot of really questionable decisions going on there, and this feels a lot like a convenient distraction.
Interesting. All right, Andrew McCabe, thank you very, very much.